Dead Ball Dancing college basketball from Club 602. Justin and I were just discussing doing some ad pulls. We got to do some ad buys for our show. Really just gotta get it out there. So if anyone would like to pay for an Instagram ad buy for us, we'll drop your handle in the ad.
Absolutely. We'll drop your handle on Instagram. We'll drop your handle on Twitter. Rick will personally invite you to one of the shows. So, tune in. Let us know.
Put another chair right here. Just right over my shoulder. All right. Well, hey, college basketball. We are into conference play here, and we warned you guys that conference play was going to get a little squirrely. I think that's where we're at. I think we're well in the squirrely range,
as evident by all of the movement green and red on our screen, right? And we're going to get into some of the why, but I had four. You do such a good job of kind of remaining flat and don't react right away. Like, I want to give you your credit there. Regardless of whether or not a team wins or loses, I think you do a really good job valuing them. I am more reactive. I personally had 4 teams in and 4 teams out of my top 25, which played into a lot of the changes that we're seeing on the screen here. So we'll get into that a little bit later.
I will say I did drop 3 teams out and then moved in my 23, 24, 25 teams with some other adjustments kind of in and out. But I had 3 teams drop completely out this week.
Gotcha.
And really, it's just because we saw some really shitty basketball this week.
We really, really did. And we're going to get into some of those teams that are offenders, but I want to start off with your first note. I want you to go first on your Big Ten, I want to say.
Yeah, UCLA sucks. We saw a lot from them. We talked about them and how they were playing and kind of the game, coming off that Gonzaga win. We're like, UCLA is here. They played UNC tight.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened. I don't know if they were reading their press clippings or if the whole team went out for New Year's, but calendar turned to January and they lost by 8 to Nebraska, and that game wasn't that close. They get blown out by Michigan at home, and they go across the country and lose to Maryland. And none of those are particularly bad losses.
Really.
But for me, it was like it's a culmination of it all. You can't lose to Nebraska and Michigan and Maryland.
Yeah.
If you're a serious contender, you have to win 2 of those, 2.5 of those, right? Lose one late. Or eat the blowout against Michigan and then annihilate Nebraska, something like that. But to lose all 3 and in the way they did, I mean, we were talking about them as a Big Ten contender. We were talking about them as a serious tournament team, and now I'm not so sure because, again, not bad losses, but these aren't the good teams in the Big Ten that they're losing to. So there's a lot more to come for this UCLA team.
And there's definitely a Big Ten team that we're going to talk about, obviously, a little bit later. But yeah, I mean, I think, I devalued UCLA early on. And then I kind of started getting caught up to the hype a little bit. They looked really, really sharp against UNC, which was a loss. And then obviously really sharp against Gonzaga. But they just kind of crapped the bed against probably their worst opponents they're going to play in a long time in the Big Ten. So I like your call out there. And I'm definitely worried about them moving forward. So I just wanted to start with Big Ten because I think that's going to be a theme later for us.
Still 31st in the Ken Palm. They're 9th in defensive rating,
yep.
But you got to be able to score against teams like Nebraska. And if you can't do that, it's only going to get worse.
Yeah, and I dropped them out of my top 25 after having them in last week. So kind of
I did as well
for UCLA. I'm going to start with Georgia, man. Wow. I don't know if you remember the episode on 1230 where I said they had a chance to start the conference play 2-0. I wasn't quite right. They lost to Mississippi, who's kind of starting to have a little bit of a resurgence here. They look pretty good. But in the last 2 games, they now have wins against 2 AP-ranked opponents, Kentucky, number 6, and Oklahoma, number 17. Again, we don't really care about the AP. Still very quality wins. I'm going to talk about their offense in a second. They're number 28 in the country in scoring defense, only allowing 64 points a game. And they're top 20 in the country in field goal percentage defense at number 17. Mississippi, they held to 62 points. Kentucky, dynamic offense who just scored 106 on Florida, right? 69 points. And Oklahoma, another dynamic offense to 62 points. They held both Kentucky and Oklahoma to sub 38% from the field. That is going to win you a lot of games. Offensively, solid. They're shooting 50% from the field, 33 from three, which they need to work on a little bit, and 73 from the line. Now, what I like about Georgia's scheme and why I think they're going to actually be a little bit of a dark horse in the SEC is they have 395 free throw attempts year to date. They have taken 150 more free throws than they've allowed their opponents. So now you can kind of see that culmination of be able to defend without fouling, be aggressive towards the basket. And in the last 3 games in SEC play, they shot 89% from the line against Ole Miss, 77 versus Kentucky, and 74 against Oklahoma. 15 assists to 13 turnovers. I'd like to see them clean that act up a little bit because they're going to go up against some better defenses in SEC play, Florida, Tennessee, which we'll get into a little bit later. But if you have a top 30 scoring defense and a top 20 field goal defense in the nation, and you're 2-1 in SEC play after 3 games, I really like their chances to make a pretty solid run. And they have Tennessee coming up on 115, which is Wednesday, right? And we're going to get into Tennessee a little bit later, but Tennessee looks beatable. I don't think they're going to win that game per se, but they lean into that defensive strategy and they get downhill against a pretty vulnerable Tennessee defense. They could upset Tennessee pretty easily, in my opinion. So really proud of Georgia. They look really sharp, and just wanted to make sure that I gave them a call out. So,
well, we've talked a lot about how strong some of these big conferences are, and what we're seeing, at least early on in conference play, is a lot of that parity. Where we've talked about how these big boys have to go through all these middling teams back to back to back to back, and there's spots where they can fall, and I mean that's what we've seen so far. Is everyone has had a misstep, everyone has fallen. Conference play is what it is. If you're a 2-loss team, you're obviously in the tournament.
Yep.
But if your 2 losses are in conference play and you don't get a bye and you lose your conference play-in game, anything can happen. And I talked about it a little bit with the Big Ten. It's like I really enjoy when the favorite doesn't win.
Yeah.
Because Auburn, if they win the SEC, if they have the best record in the SEC, they're in the tournament.
Right.
But if they lose the SEC tournament, somebody else gets to go in their spot for the auto bid, right? And it gets you the potential to see those teams again.
Yeah.
To see more of this conference play where these teams have beat each other up already.
Yeah.
Already seen each other in some cases 3 times. And you might get one of those really, really cool matchups. And the big one that I'm really tickled pink about right now is the Big East.
Yeah.
And Nova.
Yeah.
We are going to do a bracketology type show coming up here, so I won't get too deep in the weeds. I got Nova as a Sweet 16 team right now. And they have to play all these teams that they're kind of bullying, getting close to, beating in some cases. Big East, you play everybody twice.
Yep.
So Nova is getting everyone's not best shot right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's going to change because now they're nipping at the heels here. But I'm really, really excited for this one specifically, but just the general parity because Big Ten teams, you don't play everybody twice because the way the Big Ten works now. So if you run into somebody in the tournament that maybe you didn't give your best crack at the first time around, we might see something really, really cool. So that's just kind of like my general call out is give me more of the parity. Give me UCLA losing to teams they shouldn't.
Yeah.
And now let's turn around and let UCLA beat the big dogs in the Big Ten. Right? I want it to make no sense. I want it to not track. I want all of our analysis to be completely worthless. And I want us to be sitting there in March and be like, I don't know who wins this game.
Right. And some of these conferences are deep. Like you talk about Nova and like the Big East, I thought was going to be a pretty cruddy conference this year. And man, they're pretty good. Like even the bad teams are kind of good. I mean, Georgetown almost beat UConn. I like Georgetown. I like the way that Georgetown plays. I'm not going to steal your thunder, but the quality of Villanova's wins is looking better every single day. So, I imagine that 4 to 5 Big East teams are probably going to get in the tournament. So if Nova wins the Big East and wins the conference tournament, like we're not talking about Nova as like squeaking in as like a 6 or an 11, right? We're talking about Nova as like a 3 or 4. So I've been impressed, and that was a hell of a call out by you last week. I think you had him on notice. So shout out to you on that one. I'm going to go a slightly different direction. You mentioned big dogs, and this is one of the big dogs I don't think you or I have talked about this year thus far. I think we might need to pay attention to Duke, because when you think about Duke in a pretty weak ACC conference, honestly, like the ACC is not that great. Historically, Duke has been a good shooting team. Offensively, they've always been solid. Defense, solid, but their offense was always like, holy crap, like they can play. Offensively, they take too many threes. Threes make up 50% of their shots, but they're shooting 38% from three. What I really like about their offense is they're top 50 in assists per game, 41st in the nation, and they're top 20 in assist to turnover ratio at 17th. They do a really good job of getting in the lane, attracting a ton of defenders, including the big guy, and then kicking it out to three where they're streaky, but if they're hitting, because even their big guys can shoot threes, right? Now, what I think makes this Duke team a little bit different and why I'm a little bit excited about them is their defense, right? They're top 10 in the country in scoring defense, number 6, 59 points a game. That's just an ACC play. Top 5 in the country in field goal defense. They're number 5. They're only allowing 36% from the field. They had a streak of 6 games where they held opponents under 65 points the entire game. When you think of ACC play, you don't think of good defense. You just don't, right? You think of high-flying, athletic offense. That's a Big Ten level defense right there. You know what I mean? And they're really capitalizing on their athleticism. They're forcing only 12 turnovers a game, Rick, but they're turning them into 17 points off. That's a really good disparity, a really good margin right there. So the fact that Duke has figured it out on the defensive side of the ball is why I personally have them valued so high. Right now, they're sitting at number 2 in my rankings. And I think they actually have a genuine shot to be a number 1 seed in March Madness. Again, we'll get into bracketology later, but we're starting to see that these top defenses in the country are the teams that are playing the most consistently and continue to win the games they're supposed to win, which, by the way, they beat Georgia Tech by 30, Virginia Tech by 30, SMU by 27, Pittsburgh by 30, and Notre Dame by 10. I mean, they're just cleaning house right now. And I think the last point I want to make about Duke and why I'm so happy with them is I think I take back what I said about Cooper Flagg not deserving the Player of the Year over Hunter Dickinson. He's averaging 19 points a game, 9 rebounds on 48 from the field, 35 from 3, and 80% from the line as a freshman. He's almost 50, 40, 90 as a freshman. And I think if you have a player that dynamic, along with those good pieces that can defend and shoot threes very well, I think they're going to rampage through the ACC. Maybe Clemson might get them here and there. But I see them performing very well, and I do see them as a number 1 seed for sure in March Madness.
I mean, they're the best ACC team in our rankings, and it's not close. They're the best ACC team in KenPom, and it's not close.
Yeah,
they're top 5 in total defense. Like, they're a really, really good team. I think the only reason I have them at 14. You and KenPom both have them at 2.
Yep.
And really, the only reason I haven't back that far is I don't believe it yet.
Yeah.
And I'm running out of runway, right? I mean, I can only doubt a consensus top 8 team for so long before I have to move them up, and they're doing what they need to do. I mean, the only people you can play is people on your schedule, and early in the season we can nitpick who they have scheduled, but I mean, you're into your conference schedule now, and if they continue to do what they've done all season, I'm gonna have to move them up here at some point, because just 14 is not representative of how they've been playing.
Yeah, and I dude, I was with you. I disrespect them as well. Like, I paid no attention to Duke, and I think I had them pretty low because they looked shaky early on. It looked like they just weren't really figuring it out. But man, ACC play hit, and I don't know if maybe the quality of opponent has worsened. But man, they look complete right now. So
that's a wild thought. You get into conference play and your quality of opponent goes down.
Well, their non-con schedule is intense. I mean, they play serious teams, Kentucky, Gonzaga, right? All these good teams. So yeah, they looked sharp. The last one that I had is, I don't know if you remember our superlatives episode. I'm pretty sure you do. But I think I talked about the second year success that Patino had at every school that he's been at. And I want to give kudos to you really quick before I go on, because you had St. John's ranked in your top 10, maybe even 9 for almost this entire season. And I had them, I think, 12 to 10. But I didn't have them quite that high because I was like, they're still like a mid-major. I didn't know what to think. They're really freaking good. They're really freaking good. They're 14-3 overall. They're 5-1 in conference. Offensively, they're top 50 in the country in offense, 48th in the country. Their field goal percentage isn't wonderful. They're about 46% from the field. But from inside the 3-point line, they're at 53% from the field. So once they get downhill and into the paint, they're really, really good. Now, I'm going to get into their defense in a second. But if I tell you that they're top 20 in fast break points in the nation at 17 points per game, what does that lead you to believe? Right? It leads you to believe that, 1, they're rebounding and outletting immediately, or 2, they're turning teams over at an incredibly high clip and they're generating a lot of opportunities, right? So they're holding opponents to 40% from the field. And what's more impressive is they've only allowed 999 shots to their 1,100 shots. So they're not even letting teams get near the amount of opportunities that they are. They're forcing 16 turnovers a game, which is 31st in the country, and turning them into 17 points a game, which is 30th in the country. This is where I think St. John's is going to excel, and why I think they're, in my opinion, even better than the 11th in the nation. They're averaging 42 rebounds a game, which is 8th in the country, and they have a +9 rebound margin, which is 17th in the country, right? So this team is just defensively, rebounding, and scoring offense. They have something in the top 50, which is impressive to me. And they're also top 10 in the country in offensive rebounds a game. They're 10th, averaging 15 offensive rebounds a game, which is impressive, right? I mean, they're up there with some of these big boys like Florida and Tennessee, like all the teams that we always talk about. So, I think Patino has these boys flying around. I think they're going to win their conference pretty easily. They got some tough opponents coming up. But man, St. John looks crisp. And any time that you can pair a top 50 scoring offense with a top 30 defense, you're going to have a pretty good chance to make a deep run. So whatever Patino's doing, it's working. And I'm looking forward to see what they do the rest of the year. So good for St. John's, for sure.
All right, you ready to address the elephant in the room in our rankings here?
Go ahead.
Tennessee is solidly on my shit list because they don't do anything right. And it pisses me off. I can't have you winning games I don't want you to win and then losing games I need you to win. It's incredibly frustrating as a fan to watch that kind of team. I know, because it's what Wisconsin does every single year. If you want to be the number 1 team in the country, you can't do the things Wisconsin does.
Yep.
To see the inconsistency from Tennessee when we have waxed poetic about how good they look, to start the conference season the way they have is incredibly frustrating as a fan and as an analyst, because now I am not sure what to do with Tennessee. I will say I have moved them to 6 behind Florida at 5 in my rankings, because when I have the whole picture of the last 2 weeks and then the lens of the entire season, I think Florida is still better than Tennessee.
Yep.
And watching Tennessee play, I'm concerned that A&M might be better than Tennessee, and Michigan might be better than Tennessee, and Purdue might be better than Tennessee. So for me, they're still a powerful team. They're still really good. They're still an SEC powerhouse. But when I'm thinking about rest of season and how our rankings, at least the way I do my rankings, is kind of reflecting like a straight power ranking almost. This team should beat this team.
Yeah.
I am not sure I can keep Tennessee up here artificially based on what we have seen if they're going to play so inconsistently from here on out.
I couldn't agree more. I had Tennessee drop to 5, and the only reason that I didn't put them behind St. John's is because it just didn't feel right yet. One more performance like they had against Florida or Arkansas, they're outside the top 10 for me. So I think without further ado, I'm going to jump into my first on notice team because you led me in there perfectly, and I'm going to go to Tennessee. I'm not going to spend too much time. They're trending wrong. They're trending wrong offensively. Their average points per game has dropped since the start of SEC play from 80 to 77. 3 points, not that big of a deal. Yes, it is. You're going to win games by 1 or 2 points. That's a huge deal. They shot 39% versus Arkansas, 21 versus Florida, and only 40 versus Texas, right? On top of that, they're getting sloppier with the basketball, right? But prior to SEC, they were 10 turnovers a game. Now they're averaging 12 turnovers per game because of 13 against Arkansas, 13 against Florida, and 15 against Texas. Now, again, speaking about trends, we want the elite teams to step up when it's conference play time, right? Duke, right? Purdue has, right, so far. Let's be honest. Their defense, which is top 3 in the nation, only allowing 58 points a game, right? Since the beginning of SEC play, they've allowed 73 to Florida and 70 to Texas, right? Arkansas shot 38%, Florida shot 40, Texas shot 42. That's in row. So they've now allowed opponents to shoot better the last 3 games in a row. They're supposed to be top 35 in the nation in rebounding, right? At about 40 rebounds per game. And top 8 in the country in margin, right? They got out-rebounded by Florida by 20 and allowed Florida to get 19 offensive rebounds and Texas to grab 14. We want teams to step up. We want teams to step up, not fade down, right? And thus far, what Tennessee has showed me is that they're going the opposite direction of what you and I want them to. And as we just spoke about Georgia and teams that are actually hungry, right, to perform well and step up in SEC play, I think they're going to have more problems than what you and I originally anticipated. So they're a tournament team. I think they're going to still end, 3rd or 4th, maybe 2nd in the SEC. But they're going to get upset by a lot of teams unless they clean up this backwards trend on both sides of the ball. They can't defend without fouling, which was their pedigree, right? That's why they were top 3 defense in the country. I'm very worried. I'm very concerned. And I wanted them to bounce back from their 30-point loss to Florida, like Florida bounced back against Tennessee, right? Because they lost to Kentucky by 6 and then beat Tennessee by 30, right? Tennessee only beat Texas by 4 in their bounce back game. So concerned. There's many things they need to fix against a hungry SEC. So I'm putting them on notice. Not saying they're going to fall completely off, but I think we're going to see them slide a little bit.
Sticking in the SEC, we've talked about that strength. We've talked about these teams and how they're going to have to prove they can play against other elite teams. Yeah. And Texas A&M finds themselves kind of in the same boat here. They come in SEC play, and they beat Oklahoma, and they beat Texas. And then you get a game against Alabama. And the reason A&M's getting called out for me here and being put on notice is because you were supposed to lose that Alabama game.
Yeah.
It is not the end of the world losing by 6 points to an Alabama team, but it cannot start a downward slide.
Correct.
They have to play the way A&M's been playing all season. They have to play sound defense. They have to shoot well. They can't get themselves into position where they're chucking up low percentage shots and then chasing these SEC teams.
Yep.
All before the end of January here, Kentucky, Oklahoma, Texas, Ole Miss. That's the easy part of their SEC schedule. So coming off a game that we expected them to lose. I think the whole world expected them to lose to Alabama. That's fine.
Except me.
They played well. They hung around. Now you need to win your next game.
Yep.
Right? You need to win the next game. You can't let that downward slide put you in a position where the kids are scrapping. They're taking low percentage shots, and they're not playing their style of basketball. Because A&M is a top 4 or 5 team in the SEC. And they should beat most of these other teams, but you have to show up and play the game. You have to show up and do it. And if they get stuck making the small mistakes they made against Alabama and let that compound into their game, they'll drop a game against Texas. They'll drop a game against Ole Miss. So that's what I want for Texas A&M is continue playing your style of basketball. You are a good team.
Yep.
Letting Alabama start a downward slide for you is not where you want to be as a group or as individual shooters because you are never going to beat that Alabama team.
And what I don't understand is like A&M, in my opinion, did his job in that game with the exception of like two things, right? They held Bama to 39%, 35% from three. Dude, they give up 40 free throw attempts. That's absurd. Like Texas A&M's pedigree has always been you can defend without foul. And if they don't have that and they let these teams go to the line, it doesn't matter how good your field goal defense is. You gave them 27 points. Bama shot 68% from the line. Still got 27 free points essentially, right? So really like your call out.
I won by 6, right? So
and
play your ball.
And like the problem was they gave up 40 free throw attempts. Bama made 27. Bama gave up 48. And Texas A&M only made 28. They shot 58% from the line. You're not going to win games. You're not going to win games like that. And, selfishly speaking, I hope they turn it around. But we'll see what happens. Now, do you want to go UConn?
Yeah, let me hit UConn so you can talk about all your other teams.
Yeah, perfect.
UConn putting on notice because they're bad. I'm still. No, we talked about them early in the year and kind of dismissed them, and they've played their way back into our conversation. Obviously, never stopped being relevant on the national stage.
No.
But Georgetown shot 38% against UConn, and we're right there. I mentioned it earlier, talking about Nova in the Big East. You have to play all these teams again. If you get everyone's worst game and you will barely win, when these teams get it together in early February and early March, you're going to lose those games.
Yep.
So UConn continues to be the class of the Big East. No, there's good teams. There's good teams in the Big East. Marquette and Nova and Georgetown to a certain extent. Like they're good. There's good teams. And there's traditionally good teams. Like Seton Hall is not a bad team. They're really bad this year.
Yeah.
So like they can jump up and beat a UConn team. If UConn is going to continue making stupid mistakes and turning the ball over and taking low percentage shots, there's no reason why when you hold a team to 38% shooting from the floor, that game should be tight. So what I need UConn to do is play your defense, right? It's right there. Stop turning the damn ball over and stop taking bad long twos. They're a pretty good 3-point shooting team. Take one extra step back, make one extra pass, make your shots. Don't run out the shot clock and take bad twos. Don't miss your free throws, which is what happened to them against Georgetown.
Yeah.
You're the best team in this conference. Play like it, because if you don't, the next time you come around, Georgetown going to beat that ass. They're going to shoot 45% from the floor, and they're going to beat you.
Yeah.
So just that's what I want. That's what I want from them. And really it echoes through a lot of these good teams that we've been talking about. Like you are the best teams for a reason.
Yeah.
You have to do better.
Yeah. They just look more vulnerable. And I mean, when you said the class of the Big East, like, are they this year? Are they? Like,
yeah.
In my opinion, it's Marquette. Like, I think Marquette's the class of the Big East. And until UConn proves me otherwise, like that's just the case. So
I think that's fair. I think at the end of it all, it's UConn. Like if you told, like, sure, okay, Marquette wins the Big East.
Yeah. Could
totally happen. Will probably happen. Who goes deeper in the tournament, UConn or Marquette? It's probably UConn. So I think that there's room for UConn to be UConn. If they're going to be allowed to win games like this.
Yeah. I agree. I agree with that sentiment. Do you want me to couple my last on notice team with our next segment, or do you want me to go? Tell them why we're on notice, and then
we'll just go. We'll feed right into it. Talk to us about Purdue being on notice, and we'll go from there.
I know it pains your heart. I'm sorry.
They're number 25 in my rankings.
Fine. The fact that they made it back
in.
Yep. And since the loss to Auburn, they've won 5 straight. 4 of those against Big Ten opponents, and 3 of those wins by 20, and 2 of those by 18. Games in the Big Ten aren't supposed to be that wide, right? It's knockdown, grind out games, and Purdue still has some tough opponents coming up. I'm not going to get ahead of myself. Michigan State, Michigan, right? Oregon, they look sharp right now. They beat Nebraska by 40. Nebraska's not a bad team at all, and they made them look like a JUCO mid-major. Offensively is the reason why Purdue's winning games right now. They're shooting 49% from the field, 40 from 3. 40 from 3 as a team, and 71 from the line. They're top 15 in the country in three-point shooting at 11, and top 50 in makes in the country at 45, right? This is why I like this team and why I'm putting them on notice to get some upsets and then continue to perform well in the tournament. 18 assists a game, which is 14th in the country, right, to only 11 turnovers, which is the 21st best assist to turnover ratio in the country. If you're sharing the ball and taking care of the ball that well, chances are you're going to win some big games. On top of that, they have the best point guard in the country in Braden Smith. Pure point guard. When we talk about pure point guard, not just go downhill and ISO and shoot a 3, right? 15 points a game on 44% from the field, 42 from 3, and 85 from the line. 9 assists to 3 turnovers a game. That is a true point guard. When you can get someone the ball late game to be able to initiate offense, to be able to slow the game down, right? You're going to win these tightly contested Big Ten games like we know are coming up, right? I think their defense is not as good as it has been in the past, which is why I'm confused whether I'm putting them on notice because they're doing so good or if I'm just like kind of a watch out here. They're only allowing 68 points a game, which historically for them is a bit high. But they are playing really good field goal defense, allowing 43% from the field, 30 from 3, and 73 from the line. So they are trending in the right direction. I really like a 5-game win streak. I'm impressed with them. And I think, if they can show this same type of dynamic offense and just solid defense against these Big Ten opponents, I like their chances of winning the conference championship again. And I know it's a long shot because they got some really tough teams coming up. But I'm thinking that they have a shot to go 3 straight here. So we'll see.
Well, game of the week.
Good one.
How about Purdue and Oregon on the 18th? This is our number 13 against our number 19.
Yep.
This is a big one. This is a big game for teams kind of heading in different directions. You started with kind of your wide look at Purdue. Why don't you go ahead and continue, and then I'll put a little bit of a downer on it, and we can talk some Oregon.
Yeah, and I'm just going to round out my Purdue piece because I think this game relies more on Oregon than it does Purdue because Purdue's a bit more consistent where Oregon's either scoring 180 points a game or 20. I like the depth that Purdue has, and that's why I like them in this game. They have 9 players with double-digit minutes, so they have a deep rotation and high efficiency off the bench. I talked about Braden Smith, best point guard in the country, in my opinion. Their leading scorer is averaging 18 points a game, Kaufman Wren, on 62% from the field and 43% from 3, right? And on top of that, I talked about the defensive side of the ball. They're starting to figure it out. Since Big Ten play has started, opponent point per game has dropped by 3 on average, which means they started Big Ten and they said, okay, we see there's a gap on the defensive side of the ball. Let's fix that, right? So I just think they're trending correctly, right? Oregon, I had mentioned, I think last week or the week prior, I said, after the thumping by Illinois, I was like, are they ready for Big Ten play? Like, I'm not so concerned about their offense, right? Their defense is where I'm seeing some holes, right? Illinois shot 58% from the field. Maryland shot 48% from the field. Ohio State shot 43% from the field, and Penn State, which bottom quarter of the Big Ten, not a bad team, but not a great team, shot 47% from field. These teams are finding holes in a pretty tall, pretty athletic Oregon defense, and they're exploiting it. They're getting to the line. They're making their free throws. Illinois shot 82%. Penn State shot 86%. And Ohio State shot 85% from the line. And on top of that, I'm concerned about Oregon's rotation. I think, like you and I have always talked about, you need a deep bench that is efficient and doesn't tire. So when your starters are gassed from getting punched in the mouth for the first 20 minutes of the game, right, you can put in your reserves and they're ready to go. They only have 6 guys averaging over 20 minutes a game and only 8 guys that play in the rotation, right? So I just don't know if Oregon's defense is ready to stack up and play in the Big Ten. And for that reason, I do have Purdue winning this game. I'm not sure by how many, but I do have Purdue winning by, call it, maybe let's say between 5 to 10 points.
Model's sitting 6.5 right now, Purdue.
Purdue, yeah.
All right, so I have to say, Purdue is in my top 25 again. I am a known Purdue hater. So I have handpicked stats that fit my narrative. Since the beginning of conference play, Purdue is near the bottom of the Big Ten, meaning 14th or lower on volume shooting, meaning attempts on 2s and 3s, total attempts, free throw shooting percentage, offensive boards, blocks, and turnovers. Now, the reason I picked those is not just because they're what Purdue is worst at, but because of how they have the potential to blend together into a game narrative that can damn Purdue. If they have a bad turnout on all of these things at the same time, they will lose those games.
Yep.
Now, they have looked incredibly dynamic. They have not failed at all of these things in one game.
Right.
Purdue is a better team than Oregon.
Yep.
Purdue is a better Big Ten team than Oregon. I like Purdue to win this game.
Yep.
I am very concerned that if Oregon can isolate their good shooters and play them tough on the defensive side of the ball, there's a chance that Purdue could fall into this perfect storm of things that they're bad at, which just so happen to be all the things that Oregon is good at.
Fair.
Go show everybody, Purdue, that you are better.
Yep.
I have Purdue winning this game as well. Oregon isn't it. They're not it for me. I think they're actually, I'm afraid they're bad. I'm afraid that Oregon is bad. I'm afraid that we've been lied to.
Yeah.
They are 94th in shooting. They're 87th in free throws. They're 133rd in rebounding. They're 244th in turnovers.
Yep.
They got blown out by an Illinois team that just went and lost the next game. They lost to UCLA, who we just talked about sucks. They barely beat USC, Maryland, Ohio State, Penn State. So the question I kept coming back to here, and ultimately why I had to pick Purdue, is Oregon the team that beat Alabama or the one that Portland took to overtime?
Right.
Which is the real Oregon, because it's one or the other.
So you're just basing it more on consistency, right? And I think we've had that conversation before in I think with Kentucky, right? Where it's like you beat Duke, then you lost to like 2 really cruddy teams, and then you beat Gonzaga, and then you lost to a couple more cruddy teams. And it's like, I think the teams that are displaying the most consistency, even if they do have some glaring holes on either the offensive or defensive side of the ball, as long as you're consistent, I think you're going to win the game. So I think what I'm hearing is we're probably both taking Purdue. I do think it's going to be tightly contested, but I do see them winning the game. Agree with you.
Yeah, I'll be on Purdue first half, and probably for the full game. I'm kind of surprised. I actually think this is wider than you do.
Interesting.
That makes me uncomfortable because I don't like Purdue. But I think they're the better team, and I think this is where I think we're going to start to see the real Oregon. And I do think it's the team that was challenged by Portland and not the team that beat Alabama. And so as long as Purdue can show up the way they have been, I think they're going to be fine. But I mean, there are some things that if I'm Oregon's coach, I'm getting everybody ready for. I mean, you can bully Purdue sometimes, and
yeah, you can.
I just don't think they can pull it off. I don't think they can put that all together in a meaningful way and run their own game well enough to win. I don't think Oregon can do both.
I fully agree, and I think you talk about last point, and then we can close it out. Is you talk about the things that Purdue isn't really that great at, which it's obvious, it makes sense, but the thing that Purdue is good at is shooting the ever-loving hell out of the basketball, right? And since Big Ten play, or at least in the last 4 Big Ten games, Illinois shot 56% from three, Maryland shot 43, Ohio State shot 40, and Penn State shot 38. So if you're telling me that Purdue is a top 15 3-point percentage team in the nation and above 40%, there's a chance that they can take advantage of that weak perimeter defense. And I don't think it's going to be a blowout, but there's a world in which it becomes a blowout, right? Because once those shots start falling for Purdue, they have a hard time missing. So this is a good one. This is a really good one.
Yeah, I'm excited for this game.
Absolutely.
It's a thin week for college basketball. There are a couple big ones, and this was no question. I wanted to be like, no, we're not going to do Purdue just to take it from you. But this is the game of the week.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to it, man.
It's going to be on Chainlink. If you have not played our free game Chainlink, all you're doing is picking winners. String together as many wins as you can into a chain. See what you did there? Chain link. See what we did? Isn't that clever? You could pick your winner of this game and hundreds of other games every week. You're even going to see some new ones out there with a little pink outline, a hot pink outline. Ooh. Because I know most of the people watching this show are new to the channel, but Fantasy Bachelor. Yes, the show, the dating show, where one lucky bachelor dates 30 eligible women and sends them home or gives them roses to stay another week. We have a live scored app. It plays kind of like DraftKings, like daily fantasy.
Pretty cool.
Set your lineups, and then you watch live on Monday nights as the points roll in. You get points for kissing and swearing and getting naked. All kinds of stuff going on. The Rose League is our Fantasy Bachelor app. I will add it to the description of the video. But you can catch those games on Chainlink as well. Bright pink outline showcasing the Rose League. But as always, Dead Ball Dancing Game of the Week. That one's going to be in there too.
Beautiful blue outline. Rick's done a great job. And if you're not going to go download the app, which you should because it's free and it doesn't take up any space and it's very easy to use, put it in the comments. Let us know. Is it Purdue? Is it Oregon? Is Georgia as good as I'm saying they are? We want feedback. Let us know what your picks are. And thank you very much for tuning into the show. We're really having a good time with this one. And March Madness is coming up.
I've got one more piece. We're not going to do a secret third segment this week.
Let's go.
But I wanted to make you aware of something, Justin, and our viewers, and give everyone a little homework. Now, you and I, it's a little more serious homework, but the HBCU conferences, the SWAC and the MEAC, for several years now, have scheduled men's and women's games back to back in the same gym as a scheduling block. It's really, really cool to watch.
That's pretty cool.
But what the SWAC has gone and done is they're televising some of those games.
Interesting.
They're televising them in blocks, so it's more accessible to everybody to watch. If you have ESPN Plus, some of these games are out there. The men's and the women's games go back to back. So you take a 5-hour block on a Saturday afternoon, put it on a second screen, put on whatever. But the pageantry is so cool, and the bands are there, and it's usually the women's game followed by the men's game. But they're highlighting rivalries. Ooh. And some of these schools have rivalries that go way back. So the girls will duke it out for 2 hours, and then the guys will duke it out for 2 hours. And the energy in the gym is just so cool. If you aren't familiar with HBCU sports in general, Really, really cool. If you had like a bomb ass high school basketball team with a pep band and like everybody showed out, start there and then scale it for college level. It is so much fun. So if you have the opportunity, check that out. Justin, we'll talk offline, but I was thinking maybe we could pick one and then do a little recap on it. I do not want to make this a women's basketball show, but I thought this was a cool little piece of culture here.
I love that. Yeah, I would say let's definitely choose a game. And let's tell the viewers about it. Maybe we could put some clips in too. Maybe slide some clips into the show. We'll see. But love the idea. That'll be our homework. Yep.
So that's all I had. You got any last thoughts here?
No. Wild week last week. Again, like Rick mentioned, thin week, but really good game of the week coming up. So looking forward to seeing if some of these teams that are sliding can figure it out. Or if mid-majors and or low-end conference opponents are going to take their spots. I think there's a lot of opportunities for some slippage here. So just looking forward to next week, man. It's going to be a good one.
All right. I am at King Lakemore everywhere you can find me. But if you don't want fantasy bachelor shit in your feed, unfollow me for like the next 3 months because it's going to get really bad.
It's a pretty cool show. You should check it out.
All right. Awesome. Thanks for joining us. Dead ball dancing. We will see you next week. Drop your picks, Purdue, Oregon. Drop them in the chat.
Right below. Peace,
Take
y'all.
it easy, guys. That long.